Hey everybody! So we're on, I believe, day 4 of this little experiment of mine as I sort of break down, I guess, the parts of the Mastering the Game of Life engine, the sort of personal development program that I've developed, just kind of taking you through all of the sort of core components and how it works. I find this work to be very fulfilling. Hopefully you'll be interested in just hearing about sort of what I'm doing, the ideas, and maybe any one of these pieces can sort of help you and add value into your life. I know that on my journey encountering each of these pieces, it's been really cool to reflect on that as they're all sort of like working together in harmony. But it was not that long ago that they were all just kind of random ideas that I had found places. So first 3 days we sort of talked about what's the point of life. I'm just gonna give it to you. You can disagree, you can agree, but I'm gonna say the point of life is to live a life that you love to live. And that pretty much, if you look at everyone as they move around in the world, this is more or less what they're trying to do. We see people going to work, going to school, having kids, doing all sorts of things, affairs, eating sandwiches, all kind of with the goal of living a life they'd love to live. And some people are really good at this, some people are really bad at this. The people who are good at this have tapped into effortlessly bringing all of themselves online towards that goal and overcoming some of those self-sabotaging beliefs. I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm insignificant, I don't belong, and I'm imperfect. I've got them all 6. And so they do that. The pursuit of dealing with these beliefs or not, and specifically the pain of encountering them and not wanting to have to deal with them all the time, invites us into putting some of those identities or the parts of us that are feeding into those into the back burner. We throw them into our backpack and they become our shadow, which I defined as just parts of ourselves that are behind us, that we're not looking at, they just kind of hang out back there, and that other people can see and tell us about. So today I wanted to take the opportunity to really expand the idea of the shadow into what most of my work is, which is around parts theory, parts integration. This work comes from family systems therapy, but I've kind of just taken aspects of that from integral theory, parts of that from that, and sort of mixed it together. So that's just where the ideas came from. At least that's got me started to think about this. So you got your shadow, right? And since you can separate your awareness from the things that you're conscious of and the things that you're unconscious of, in theory, there are parts of you that are also at different degrees of conscious of each other. So the part of you that is most easy for you to see is the part of you that other people tell you about. It's like, I don't identify with this, but my mom, my sister, my girlfriend, my friends all tell me that I'm this way. Over time, that eventually just becomes something that's conscious of me. And so our relationships are one of the first levels of how shadow material shows up. Now, when you deny the things that people tell you about yourself, over time, you end up actually projecting those things onto other people. So what I have experienced, and again, just try this idea on, is that every negative feeling that you have for someone else is actually self-generated. Now, I want you to just think about this for a second. Think about the worst person that you can think of. How do you know they're bad? And I really want you to sit and think with that for a second. Now, you can come up with a lot of different reasons. Oh, they do this, they do that, that's bad, this segment, we're terrible, this person is garbage, I don't like them. But I always ask my clients this question, and so I'll ask it to you right now. If an alien were to come down and see all of those things that they were doing, would they come to the same conclusion that they're bad? Maybe the aliens will have a society where they're similar enough to us that they could come to their conclusions, but my guess is actually they're going to come up with all sorts of new reasons why this person is bad, and maybe not see any of the reasons that you would. And so for that reason, when we decide that someone is terrible, it's usually because we've seen something in ourselves that we don't know what to do with. And so instead of owning it and having it be conscious, just, oh yeah, this is just something that happens, we need to find someone to put it on. And so we find people that we don't like, people who consciously embody the things that we don't like in ourselves. We label them as bad. In a future video, we'll all kind of debunk the concept of good and bad. But we're not gonna do that today. We're instead going to explore how these parts sort of get chopped up. Because over time, it becomes really easy for you to just say, this isn't my problem, this is someone else's problem. Again, this is the problem that originates in your awareness that you push into the back of your awareness, and then you start projecting onto other people. We start this with our parents. Again, they invent our personalities from, again, till about 7 years old. So when we see something good or bad, we'll usually see it in terms of what is we like about our parents, and we'll see it in terms of what we don't like about our parents. The question that we never ask as kids, though, is, well, how did our parents get that way? Well, they must have had the same experience with their parents, who had the same experience with their parents, so forth and so on. Now, I bring this up because this sort of kicking the can of shadow material through the generations is what some people would say that Jung talks about in his collective unconscious. We have a shared pile of things that humanity has sort of stuck in its own backpack that we project on each other, and that causes war and all of this stuff. Now, we did all of this specifically to avoid having to encounter the untrue beliefs that we weren't good enough, that we're not ready, that we don't belong. Like, the concept of belonging has pretty much invented racism. Tribal belonging says, we're good, you're bad. We administrate who gets to belong and who doesn't, and if you belong over there, forget you, and if you belong here, you're great. But as you see, like, that belonging just changes left and right, all sorts throughout. So a world in which you don't have access to those limiting beliefs is a world in which you're not worried about the concept of belonging, because you belong at the very least to yourself. So when you see things in your external world that give you a negative charge, parts integration theory would have you say, okay, I just got some data. I've got some data that there is a part of me that I can't see that is being projected on this person, because I couldn't consider them to be bad without that concept inside myself. Sit on that for a second. That one's really hard. I'm still struggling with this one. You cannot see, or really you cannot have a negative charge, or really you can't have any sort of emotional charge for someone if you don't have the capacity to have it within yourself. This goes actually both ways, positive and negative. If you see someone that is your hero, you think they are the greatest person in the world, they are the bomb.com, you cannot see them unless you have even just the tiniest germ of that within yourself, because you've got nothing to refer it to. In Westworld, there's that, spoiler alert, there's a sort of really climactic scene in the first season where Bernard is revealed to be a robot. And they find out that he's a robot because the Westworld hosts are trained so that they can't see information that would reveal to them that they aren't real. And when Bernard goes to see his own diagram, he looks at it and says, I can't see anything. Because he can't see it. He has no concept for it. He was literally programmed not to be able to see anything that would challenge that worldview. In a lot of ways, we are in the same situation. We refuse to see it, and so we push it onto other people, positive and negative. And so parts integration theory and says, take back as much of those negative, positive, emotional charges as you can so you can use them. If you can take back the emotional charge, the sort of power that you've given to people by saying this person is good and this person is bad, and just hold it within yourself as sort of this neutral space of like, it's just not much of anything. It's, at best, we'll talk about this later, maybe it's healthy and unhealthy, but it's got no charge to it. From there is where you can make the creative action to actually go about creating that life you want to live. Because if you're continuing to move around and have these charges left, right, up, down, you're going to be stuck in reactions to other people. But those reactions to other people are just reactions to what is unprocessed in your shadow within yourself. Are you following me? I get really excited about this, but it's also some like crazy stuff, so I don't blame you if this is a little bit mind-blowing. So what do we do? That's immediately the question that emerges on the other side of that. We'll talk to that more, but first, just recognize with it. Just go through your day and try and be mindful of every sort of reaction that you have. Go watch TV, because this isn't just limited to people. I think it's easier to talk about the idea as it refers to people, but everything that we have an emotional concept, or anything that we can have an emotion for, is the opportunity to do some shadow work. Now, before you start jumping on me and saying, shadow work, I can't do all that shadow work. That's so much stuff. There's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. We already talked about that. You are perfect. The only reason to do shadow work is because it is the fastest, at least in my experience, way to take the material that is behind you to put in front of you so that you can make a true choice. That's the only reason you do it. I'm building this up very specifically so that people can't run around and say, why are you saying I need to do that? I don't want to do that. Chill. I don't care. I truly do not care. I'm just breaking down a mechanism that I've sort of seen in the world that's interesting to play around with. So we pull back in the emotional charges that we projected onto people, objects, things, places, concepts. We take it back in within ourselves. We get to take that energy now that we're not spending it, shooting it out to other people because we don't want to deal with what's in our backpack. We recognize that that's a part of ourselves. We integrate it, shadow parts integration, integrate it into our experience, and then we make a choice that emerges out of all of that. And so a choice that emerges out of all those parts in conversation with each other is probably my closest definition to a true choice. So in future videos, we're going to explore how you can identify if you've got an emotional charge on something. We'll identify the exact process of sort of bringing that back in, alchemizing the emotions. We'll actually do a little bit of a jam on this book that I read called How Emotions Are Made. Again, totally blew my mind as far as the concepts of how we even have our emotional concepts. And we'll talk about, how to eventually build a life around you out of these parts, almost like Lego set, into something that you'd want to live. So be on the lookout for that. If you are just seeing me for the first time, go ahead and subscribe here so you get notified when there are new videos. But otherwise, I'll see you next time.